Hi, everybody. I wanted to do a little response video to Laura Vandervoss. She's kind of liberal, but she uses all the standard talking points to justify NFP. And I've fast forwarded a little on her video just to leave some responses. And I'm going to do my best here. And also, I will clean up everything in the comment section. So any loose ends or anything I say that doesn't seem to add up to you or you want me to back it up, I'm happy to do that. Just don't be shy on the comments. All right, let's listen to Laura here talk about why NFP is licit. Here we go.
Although since the middle of the 19th century, several decisions of the sacred penitentiary had made it clear that NFP use was not illicit.
Wrong. She's wrong right there. The decisions of the sacred penitentiary in the 1800s made it clear that you could never impede conception because conception is primary and stands alone. So obviously contraception impedes that, but so does anything which stops procreation, be it the calendar or whatever. And I have all the links to explain why the sacred penitentiary did not approve NFP, which is the urban myth that she's going on about.
The first papal statement on it was in Pius XI's magnificent encyclical Casti Connubii, 1930,
Wrong.
after a condemnation of anything that may interfere with the conjugal act to prevent conception. The pontiff went on to say, quote, "Nor are those considered as acting against nature who in the married state use their right in the proper manner, although on account of natural reasons, either of time or of certain defects, new life cannot be brought forth."
Okay, hold it right there. That's the whole thing where they say Casti Connubii 59 approves NFP because of reasons of time or natural reasons. Okay, that means external to what's going on, meaning you don't get to plan your timing. That means, like I said, menopause or sterility, something like that. And the 1944 Rota confirmed that, which I can also show you in the comments if you want. So no, Pius the 11th in Casti 59 condemned NFP because NFP is an elective way to control fertility because human life can be brought forth, but you don't want it to be brought forth, which is why you use a method, which is what you can't do. Let's listen here.
For in matrimony, as well as in the use of matrimonial rights, there are also secondary ends, such as mutual aid, the cultivating of mutual love, and the quieting of concupiscence, which husband and wife are not forbidden to consider, so long as they are subordinated to the primary end, and so long as the
Right, primary. Yes, that's right. The primary end is independent of the secondary end. So if you're going to pursue the secondary ends, they must be pursued through the primary end only, and it's not vice versa.
intrinsic nature of the act is preserved. He has a footnote with the exact Latin text. You can read that from that quote. The medical knowledge for the use of NFP was just beginning to be known at the time Pius XI wrote this.
Okay, that's another myth. We didn't know much about NFP at this time, and it was just starting to get known around Pius XI. It's been known since the time of the Manichees with St. Augustine, because they had a rough idea of NFP and they knew what fertility was, and they didn't want any kids, so they would avoid relations during fertility. And St. Augustine told them, knock it off. You are treating your spouse like a whore, basically, when you do that. Okay, so it has always been, if you're not trying to get pregnant, it's a sin. It's a sin. It's a venial sin if you have the intention to avoid pregnancy. It's a grave sin if you use a method to avoid pregnancy.
Encyclical, but within a few years that knowledge had become better understood and had begun to be distilled into popular works and set out as systems for use by married couples, known at the time, of course, as rhythm or calendar rhythm. As a result of this increasing knowledge, Pius XI's successor, Pius XII, specified more clearly what was licit or illicit in the use of NFP. Let us look at
Pius XII specified more clearly what was licit. No, what he did, Pius XII was the first to say procreation is primary except when it's not primary, and therefore you can avoid pregnancy. this is where it all starts. So, okay, let's listen.
Of his addresses on the subject. The first of these is his famous allocution to midwives of October 29th, 1951.
Yep.
He just shows you where you can read that. Curiously, this document is sometimes cited by those who seem to want to restrict unduly the licit use of NFP.
It's not restricting the licit use by Pius XII. It's zero, not restriction, but none. Okay, here.
Yeah.
In a way, she's making a point, which I always make. If NFP is natural, there need be no restriction or no grave cause. Or no, and by the way, there's no reason for it. It's not, doesn't have to have anything to do with justice, because you don't have a duty to procreate. So if NFP is natural, you don't need a grave cause or a serious cause or any cause to use NFP. If it's not natural, which it isn't, no cause can justify its use.
I've seen that. But in fact, in this address, Pius XII hardly even deals with the ordinary use of natural family planning. Rather, he speaks primarily of those who would, quote,
the ordinary
the
use,
state, unquote, and, quote, use continually the faculty proper to such a state, unquote, but at the same time avoid children entirely. And for this, he rightly requires a serious reason. Why is this? The pontiff points out the common sense truth that the human race depends on married couples for much of its temporal welfare. The individual and society, he says, the people and the state.
To me, this is like a Nazi argument. You have to have so many people. You know, we have to count the people, and you have to. Oh God. So she's saying that Pius XII says, you know, the reason why you can't use NFP all the time is because we need more people. No, there's, like I said, there's no duty to procreate, and otherwise you could say, well, heck, I've had 5 kids or 9 kids or 19 kids. Therefore, I've decided that I can use NFP. Might as well say contraception at that point. Wrong. It's nature or it's not. Like Yoda says, do or do not. There is no try. I need to make a Facebook meme about that. Remind myself later. Here we go.
The church itself depend for their existence in the order established by God on fruitful marriages, unquote. Thus, to embrace a state established by God for the procreation and formation of children, and without a sufficient reason to forego altogether having children, is obviously an injustice.
To forego altogether having children is obviously an injustice. That's a lie. There's no duty to procreate. If you don't want to use your matrimonial rights, there's no duty to use them. So it's not unjust, because there's no requirement to procreate. And that's the whole basis for making any kind of controlling birth licit, because you can have exceptions. In justice, you must attend Sunday Mass. So there can be exceptions if you have a good reason, but there is no, you don't have to produce X number of kids in justice unless you have a good reason. Let's go.
That's a really important thing, that in the context of that address, the Pope wasn't talking about like ordinary use of that. He was talking about like extreme selfish use of it, basically. Okay. It is the kind of action that causes children to cry out, "It's not fair." Such couples enjoy all the benefits and pleasures of marriage and deliberately reject the whole purpose for which such benefits and pleasures were instituted. But even so, Pope Pius does not forbid couples that have some important reason for entirely avoiding pregnancy to marry, for he states, quote, serious motives, such as those which not rarely arise from medical, eugenic, economic, and social so-called indications, may exempt husband and wife from the obligatory positive debt, i.e. debt to society by.
Okay, so obligatory positive debt to society. There she says it right there. The first time any Catholic ever said that was Pius XII in Midwives, that we have an obligatory debt to produce kids. Wrong. Total Protestant. Began with the Anglicans at Lambeth, 1930, when they first, because in 1920, when they said contraception is illicit, increase and multiply was nature. In 1930, when they wanted to justify contraception, they said increase and multiply is a duty. Therefore, we can have an exception.
By having children for a long period or even for the entire period of matrimonial life, unquote. It says, here Pope Pius differs from a recent writer, Father Chad Ripperger, who opines that couples, quote, should not marry if they cannot assume the essential obligations of marriage, part of which is the preparedness to have children, unquote.
By the way, Father Ripperger is between a rock and a hard place on this because he tries to say that procreation alone is primary, but then he says NFP can be licit, so he you can't hold all that together. So he kind of fudges a little bit, and I'm working on trying to communicate with Father Ripperger, but there's some issue. You can't defend marriage nor define it and say NFP is licit at the same time.
Let's see. Immodesty unrecognized the problems with teaching NFP. Also in Homiletic and Pastoral Review, he gives that quotation, says, but where a sufficiently grave cause obtains, Pius recognizes that the secondary ends of marriage are nonetheless still present and may justify such a union.
What? Okay, whatever she said. Where there's sufficient cause, you can pursue the secondary ends. Okay, right there, they're effectively saying procreation is not the primary purpose of the conjugal act if you have grave cause to avoid a baby. That's called bending nature. That's where we get gender fluid, what is a woman, love wins, all that stuff. Because if nature can be changed based on circumstances, Katie barred the door. And if you look, hey, that's you're look at her face now. Sorry, that's funny. If you if that's the deal, then we got nothing, because who's to say what is natural and what's not? You can't, because you said if circumstances warrant, you can change nature. So we're totally hosed, and NFP is holding the definition of nature at gunpoint. But we can't give up our NFP. We just dance around it and giggle about it a lot on YouTube. Some of the NFP people, everything's just like funny joke all the time. All right, let's go.
Important to know. Okay. The allocution to midwives sets forth the basic principles that are needed to address moral questions arising from the use of natural family planning, but it does not work these out in detail. Based on Pius's teaching, we can see that the essential moral question of the use of NFP is a question of balance, the balance of its use and the frequency of its use against the seriousness of the reason for that use. To make use of NFP throughout an entire marriage indeed requires serious justifying reason, or to use it for a long period likewise. But what of other circumstances?
No. Like I said, sorry to repeat myself. If it's natural, you don't need a reason. Just be natural. If it's not natural, no reason will work. And that's why Pius the you know what? I'm gonna pull this up on. Okay, so hang on. Sure. Okay, here we go. Look, number 54. But no reason, however grave. So all your circumstances you're talking about, all your eugenic this and whatever. No reason, however grave, may be put forward anything intrinsically against nature, may become conformable to nature. Therefore, okay. So what that means is, if NFP is natural, you don't need a grave reason. You don't need any reason. If it's not natural, no reason, however grave. So it's all about whether it's natural or not. You can't. So, like I said, it's all or nothing. It's not somewhere in the middle. That's should be plain and simple. So that's why it doesn't make sense. Which is why everyone keeps coming back to. It's really just shoot. Let me change the screen here. See if I could share this tab instead. All right, here we go. Let's see what she says.
About a month after his earlier address, on November 26, 1951, Pius XII spoke to the Association of Large Families. After praising the generosity of husbands and wives, quote, who, for the love of God and trusting in him, courageously raise a numerous family, unquote, the pontiff says the following, quote, the church, on the other hand, can understand with sympathy and comprehension the real difficulties of matrimonial life in these our days. For this reason, in our last address on conjugal morality, we affirmed the legitimacy and at the same time the limits, truly very wide, of that controlling of births, which, unlike the so-called birth control, is compatible with God's law.
All right, so this is the crazy part. It's not compatible with God's law to circumscribe fertility. You can't do it. let's listen to it. Let's keep going.
It can be hoped that for such a lawful method, a sufficiently certain scientific basis can be found, and recent research seems to confirm this hope. Unquote. This second address by Pius XII, though not treating of the specifics of the moral use of NFP, certainly indicates limits truly very wide, he said, that pontiff had a favorable attitude toward the use of natural family planning and did not desire to restrict it to the most narrow of circumstances. Such an attitude continued throughout his reign until the church entered the turbulent period of the council. And
oh, brother. Okay. Obviously, we can't just go on the Pope's attitude, whether NFP is listed or not. Like if a Pope says, just go hog wild with your NFP, and then the next Pope says, only for super grave reasons. No. It's all or nothing, like I said. Here.
its aftermath. As everyone knows, after the Second Vatican Council, it was widely expected that despite the authoritative teachings of Pius XI and Pius XII, somehow the Church would and could change her teachings on contraception. Footnote. Because of erroneous interpretations of the conciliar decree on religious liberty, Dignitatis Humanae, many had come to believe that Catholic doctrine could be modified to suit the changing ideas of society. See my article, Catholics and Religious Liberty, What Can We Believe? Okay.
I like her background, even though it's
okay.
I
But
think
Pope
it's
Paul
cool.
VI, in an action that was little short of heroic, issued his encyclical Humanae Vitae on July 25th, 1968. Woo! Although, as we will see,
Liberals love Humanae Vitae. They do, because it allows contraception, organic. Oh boy. Hang on.
Humanae Vitae continues the same approach to natural family planning use as found in the teaching of Pius XII. We are met with an initial difficulty, based, however, on an error. In the pamphlet edition of Humanae Vitae, published by the Daughters of St. Paul, which features the NC News Service translation, the section that deals with illicit use of NFP, section 16 of the encyclical, reads in part as follows, quote, if then there are serious motives to space out births which derive from the physical or psychological conditions of husband and wife, or from external conditions, the Church teaches that it is then licit to take into account the natural rhythms immanent in the generative functions, unquote. This text would seem to teach that any illicit use of natural family planning is confined to situations in which, quote unquote, serious motives are present, so that the same conditions apply to use of NFP simply to space out births as to its use, quote, for a long period or even for the entire period of matrimonial life, unquote, as Pius XII had earlier taught. But this is not the case, for in this instance, it is simply a case of a faulty translation. The Latin of the beginning of the above quotation runs, si igitur juste ad sint causae generationes subsequentes intervallandi, quae a conjugum corporis vel animi conditionibus. Okay, the word erroneously translated as serious is the Latin word juste. Paul VI thus speaks of just causes or just reasons, and there is no mention of serious at all.
Right. So serious, grave, just, well-grounded. It makes no difference. Doesn't matter, because it's not natural to use marriage to not have kids. Casti connubii. Here, I'm gonna put that up too. Just a minute. Okay. Since therefore the conjugal act is destined primarily by nature for the begetting of children. Okay, dig that. Basic. There's one nature, and it's primarily for the begetting of children. That's why you can't change that no matter what the reason. It's so straightforward, but we're so hell-bent on making sure we get our NFP that we hold our mouth just right. So we read this. It's crazy. All right, let's go back to the other. Here we go.
Fortunately, more accurate translations followed, so that in the volume of post-Vatican II documents edited by Austin Flannery, Juste is translated as reasonable. But for reasons unknown to me, serious motives, quote unquote, has acquired a life of its own, and one sees it repeated again and again.
Right. So all this stuff is, okay, people like Father Ripperger and on that spectrum are all like, we got to be super serious about our reasons. And it's like saying, that's like saying you can only have an abortion for an extreme case. And then the liberals are like, no, you can have an abortion up to 9 months if you think it's right for you. So you have a spectrum. All abortions are intrinsically evil, so it doesn't matter what your reason is. And it's the same for changing, increase, and multiply. I don't care how you do it. It doesn't matter what method you use. You can't try to not have kids unless you change the primary purpose of marriage, which is what Humanae Vitae attempted to do, because obviously we have something that's neither fish nor fowl when you say procreation is primary, but you can avoid it if you have a serious cause. Now procreation is not primary. Okay, here, let's listen.
Again, aside by me, I've seen this even said extreme and grave. Like people even get more like into this, like making
Whatever.
it really, really out there. Okay.
So
Politics did not specify exactly what he meant by just reasons, and we will look at that more closely now. But here we should simply note that any use of Humanae Vitae to try to show that serious reasons are required for the licit use of NFP is simply based on an error. Let us look at just two more documents of the Magisterium in our survey of church teaching. And first, the Apostolic Exhortation Familiaris Consortio of John Paul II, November 22nd, 1981. In this document, John Paul not only reaffirms the licitness of, quote, recourse to periods of infertility, unquote, but he praises this practice as likely to lead to, quote, dialogue, reciprocal respect, shared responsibility, and self-control, unquote. He continues.
Right. So John Paul II, his whole thing was this: marriage is primarily a foundation of what is the term? Come on, John. Hang on. I'm gonna think of it in just a minute. The personalistic norm. That's what it is. It's the personalistic norm. That's what John Paul II is all about. So if marriage is the personalistic norm, that's another way of saying the relationship is the primary or the essence of marriage, and everything else flows from that, which is 180 degrees wrong. That's turning marriage upside down. That's why we're getting all the crazy, because we're saying nature can be designed by us rather than us being designed by nature. I didn't put that right. At any rate, when you flip over the hierarchy of ends, that's what you get. So this is why JP2 is saying what he's saying, because he's mostly all about the relationship, not procreation. And that's how they get there. They call it personalistic norm, and everyone's like, yes, we want more love and all that. Here we go.
Quote, in this context, the couple comes to experience how conjugal communion is enriched with those values of tenderness and affection, which constitute the inner soul of human sexuality.
Constitute the inner soul of sexuality. Those are all nice. Oh, what the heck is that? You can't. What's the inner soul? Constitutes? That's like legal. All right. So they're saying all these weaselly words, essentially, effectively telegraphing marriage as redefined without really doing it. That's all that's going on. Hang on.
In its physical dimension also. As he frequently did, unquote, as he frequently did, John Paul in this passage attempts to discover the inner meaning and value of things, and not simply to teach about their proper use and morality, essential though these are. And thus he discerned value in the use of NFP, value more than simply for the spacing of pregnancies, which you get by talking to people who have used it. Oh, okay. Finally, let us look at the Catechism of the Catholic Church. In number 2368, we find again the word just used by Paul VI in Humanae Vitae.
Do I need to repeat myself? There's no duty to have kids. There's no duty to produce kids. So therefore, controlling birth has nothing to do with justice. It's all nature. And part of how we know this is back in Genesis, God told the fish and the birds, increase and multiply, which is not a command and it's not a precept. It's just nature. This is what you do. This is what it's for. This is what happens. Okay. Increase and multiply. So it's not, like I said, it has nothing to do with justice because it's not a commandment. Increase and multiply is not a commandment. It is a blessing of nature. That's what it is. If you're going to get involved in nature, you go with it.
And we read, quote, for just reasons, spouses may wish to space the births of their children, unquote.
You're killing me. Go ahead, whatever. Just reasons.
This sums up what we have seen above in the teaching of Pius XI, Pius XII, Paul VI, and John Paul II, and may be taken as indicating the Church's judgment on this matter. From these,
oh boy, no. Maybe taken as the Church's judgment. You can't change nature. Since nature can't move, the definition of marriage can't move, and the primary purpose is independent of the secondary purposes. Otherwise, nothing can happen. If you can't have unity without procreation, or you can't have procreation without unity, then you can't have any of it, because something's got to come first, and that's procreation.
These documents of the magisterium, we can see that the Church does not look on natural family planning with a jaundiced eye. To be sure, excusing reasons are necessary for its use, but Pius XII mentions the quote-unquote very wide limits for its licit use. John Paul II speaks of its value in the development of marital love.
Like I said, if love wins, it's just, there's no reason to not use NFP, whatever you feel, baby.
We have also seen that except for its use over the entire lifetime of a marriage or for a long period, the magisterium has never required serious or grave reasons for its use. Let us look at the issue more generally and examine the question of what might be just reasons for its use. We should keep in mind what seems to be the basic line of papal thought, namely that the longer the use, generally speaking, the more serious the reason that will be required.
Doesn't matter.
Thus, for example, it would seem that for a couple with only 1 or 2 children, to voluntarily cease having children would indeed require some serious and extraordinary cause.
Yeah, this is utilitarian crazy. You only have 1 or 2 children? Oh boy, you need to be having more. Okay, then sometime down the road, oh, you only have 7 children? You need to be having fewer. Or who's to say what the number is? The answer is God, not us. Like I said, like the prophet Yoda say, do or do not. Okay, hang on.
Or to space children 6 years apart would require a more serious reason than 3 years, and so on.
Hi, baby.
I wish to approach the remainder of this discussion from 2 points of view. The first involves the question of the primary end of marriage, which I mentioned above, namely the procreation and education of children. Now, the important thing to note about this is that the primary end of marriage is the procreation and education of children. If we forget the words and education, we are apt to see the value of marriage only in how many children a couple can have. And even
no, okay. Yes, you need to educate the children, but hang on. I'll get to the point here in a minute.
Even to reduce a wife's value to that of how many children she bears.
That's stupid. That's another way of saying there's more, that there's more to the essence of marriage than procreation, which is a lie. And this is like feminist, this is legalized feminism, what she's talking about. This is cancel the marriage debt. That's what she's talking about. Because if you have the marriage debt, then the consent has already happened and there's the contract. But if marriage is more than just the debt, then there isn't any, because their consent is always required. That'll get me off on a tangent. So hold on, let's go.
But if we consider the phrase as a whole, procreation and education, we will reach a different conclusion. For as Pius XII noted, quote, the work of education exceeds by far in its importance and its consequences that of generation, unquote. That's from the...
Okay, so she's essentially trying to say the conjugal act is primarily for more than just generation. It's not. Marriage, you need to educate the kids. You need to raise them Catholic. But the purpose of the conjugal act has nothing to do with raising them Catholic. It's just to get, obviously, the kids.
The allocution to the members of the Second World Congress of Fertility and Sterility, May 19th, 1956. And surely here education means much more than schooling. Perhaps it could be rendered best as formation, the entire spiritual, moral, intellectual, social, and physical shaping of a child, so that he can serve God in this world and attain eternal life in the next. Certainly, in order to be educated, a child must first be generated and born. But as we see all too evidently around us, not all children who are procreated are educated. And if parents are indeed the first and primary educators of their children, then the state of the parent's health, both physical and psychological, has a great impact on their ability to educate their children.
Fine. So what she's saying is if the parents are suffering, then you can change nature. It's situation ethics. That's all it is. But there's so much pressure on it. Everyone's like, yes, it's the same thing with abortion. It's the same thing with anything that's intrinsically evil. If you have enough reason to say yes to it, everyone says go ahead. That's why Mormons now say you pray about it with your one of your elder pastors and you can do the abortion. All this crazy stuff. Hang on.
He has a note here, a footnote, that this references Gravissimum Educationis and John Paul II's Familiaris Consortium. Okay. Thus, if parents are stressed or constantly tired or overworked, they are not apt to be the best educators of their children.
You don't have to be the best. You don't have to be the worst. It doesn't matter legally how good of an educator you are. It only matters that you said yes to raising your kids Catholic. The level of good or bad has nothing to do with licetiety or validity of the marriage or anything like that. So you can't say, well, I can stop having kids because I can't educate them well. Fine. If that's where you're at, then don't do the act. No, we can do the act and not have the kids. Isn't that cool? Isn't that contraception? Oh no. You know something? It's only Catholics that can't see it. Any non-Catholic can see it because there's no institutional bias. They will say it's just Catholic contraception.
I am not speaking of their ability to ferry their children around for the latest in art or music lessons or sports camps. Rather, I am thinking of the daily interaction of parents and children and the strength needed by parents for the sometimes arduous task of rearing their children. It does not conduce to forming children psychologically if their parents are frequently irritable or overly critical. Yet, as is obvious,
frequently
fatigue and stress tend to bring out such negative qualities in human beings. While it is true that the lesson of generous sacrifice is one of the best that parents can give their children, not everyone is capable of heroic virtue. I'm not sure I agree with that.
She's right. Everyone is capable of heroic virtue. And just, I don't need to show it to you, but in Casti Connubii also, they say you can live the life of complete continence if that's what you need to do because you get the grace. And it is anathema to say you do not have the grace to live your state in life what you need to do. So anyone can do heroic virtue. If God calls you to it, you'll have the grace.
But anyway, I think everything, the points he's making are good. That exact statement, I don't know if I agree with. Okay. Everyone knows mothers who bear 8, 10, or 12 children and who manage such large households with little difficulty, but not everyone has the requisite emotional and physical resources to do this, so that what for some might be done without difficulty, for others might require a heroic virtue that the church has generally not insisted on. Okay. He has a footnote. Footnote says,
the church has insisted, like I said, that you live. Okay, I'm going to go back to Casti Connubii. I'm going to show you exactly what it says. Okay, let's check this out. This is Casti 61. There is no possible circumstance, all these things she's talking about, tired parents, blah, 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 in which husband and wife cannot, strengthened by the grace of God, fulfill their duties and preserve their wedlock chastity unspotted. That means have kids or don't do the act. That's what that means. Okay, so yeah, Council of Trent. No one be so rash as to assert that which the fathers of the council have placed under anathema, namely that there be no precepts of God impossible for the just to observe. God does not ask the impossible, but his commands instructs you that you do what you are able and pray for what you are not able. So this is all this sob story stuff. I got a hard time, therefore I can use NFP. No, you can't, like I said, because it's not natural. All right, let's go back to her. Share this tab instead. Here we go.
Moreover, natural family planning is perhaps not so easy to misuse as some seem to think. Unlike contraceptive use, where especially with the pill, couples can go on unthinkingly contracepting for years on end, with NFP, each month a couple must rethink their decision to postpone or avoid the possibility of a pregnancy.
It's not their decision to postpone a pregnancy. Well, if you're like, I guess I'm repeating myself.
And thanks to the God-given attraction of the sexes for each other, they have a strong incentive to throw caution to the winds. That's hilarious. Okay. So I believe, my personal note on this, God wills us all to practice heroic virtue at times, for which he gives us particular grace.
Yeah.
But we also need to know our limits, and that God is not asking us necessarily for heroic virtue, the exercise of that in every single area to such a degree as other people that he's calling to a little different lifestyle. So it's good to acknowledge that, like, at some point the human person starts breaking down under certain circumstances, and that can really happen with parenting. And certain people, especially in their own formation or what they've been through in life before and what has prepared them for that or has not prepared them, they may not be equipped due to the circumstances of life to handle as many children as another person might. And that's not necessarily something you can just overcome.
But God will send you the kids that he wants you to have. And St. John Vianney, I think somewhat famously said it to someone who's talking about having all these kids or something, and they said, just remember those who are in hell for not having all the kids that God sent them. God wanted them to have, and they didn't bring them forth. So she shall be saved through childbearing if she continue in faith. And NFP is not continuing in faith. NFP is using personal providence rather than God's providence.
They may not have the support at the time that they needed to overcome that. So there's so many circumstances. Okay. Some have questioned why suddenly in this age, Catholic married couples need to make use of NFP when for centuries such knowledge did not even exist. It says, of course, the form of NFP did exist in prior ages, that of spacing births by nursing, a method still recommended and taught today, he says in a footnote.
By the way, nursing is not a form of spacing babies. It's nursing. It happens to affect fertility, but it's not primarily for that. If you use nursing primarily to control fertility, that's sinful. Just be natural and let nature take its course.
Okay. Father Ripperger, for example, in the article cited in note 6 states, quote, for centuries people have been getting married and leading perfectly Catholic married lives without knowledge of NFP, unquote, page 49.
That's right.
This, of course, is true, but the answer to that is found in the words of Pius XII to the Association of Large Families quoted above, quote, the church, on the other hand, can understand with sympathy and comprehension the real difficulties of matrimonial life in these our days, unquote.
Every day. Okay. I think there's always been difficulties in matrimonial life. And if you want to go back to, a couple centuries ago, it could have been tougher, maybe. So God knows what's going on and God provides. So to say we're just enlightened now and we have all this new technology and we have all this new knowledge and we can handle some of our own providence, bad idea.
With the absence of extended families, with denatured food, with often stressful commutes, and even the evil, sometimes necessary, of both parents working outside the home, married life has difficulties that were largely unknown in earlier times.
Whatever. This is what Margaret Sanger, she was sledgehammering everybody on this. She was the one who said procreation is secondary. Okay? That's where it all comes from. Margaret Sanger and the Anglicans. And there was so much pressure, political pressure, by saying, yes, we have all these modern things, which means they're so different now. Therefore, we have to change nature. We have to say it's not always about procreation. And they caved. And now look what we've got. You got Bruce Jenner running around, and it's just getting crazier and crazier. Cat people, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yes. See, for example, Father Dennis Fahey, The Church and Farming. He begins his chapter on modern processed food with a quotation from Dr. Alexis Carroll. Modern man is oh, interesting. So I was thinking about denatured food. Then he has this footnote. Okay, so go check that out if you're interested. All right. I mean, it's true. We have weird things going on in our day that were not an issue centuries ago. And also, society lived on a very different model. Generally, a lot more support and in generational living.
Oh yeah. Okay. If you're saying, abortion's really bad, and I can see why they didn't do it 500 years ago or 100 years ago, but our situation is so different today that I think it's justified. That's exactly what she's saying. That the reason why NFP is okay is because of our situation. Not if it's unnatural, which is why, like here, like just what he said. Share this down here, right here. Did it 54, yo. This is the key phrase. This is the phrase that pays right here. No reason, however grave. This is cuts it off right there. She's going on and on about all these reasons. Doesn't matter, because anything intrinsically against nature, when you make the conjugal act destined primarily for not begetting children, you're violating nature. And look what it says. You frustrate the natural purpose. It is shameful and intrinsically vicious. This kind of stuff, he is totally right. All right, hang on.
And things like that, where our society has lost that to a great extent, and it would take a lot of time and effort to bring that back. It's not just going to be tomorrow. Okay. All right. It seems as if God provided for the knowledge of female fertility at exactly the right time in the history of mankind, at the time when the increasing complexities of modern life would make such knowledge helpful and even, in a sense, necessary for modern families. Thus, I would argue that the just causes stipulated by Paul VI for the licit use of NFP would include such reasons as stress, both physical and emotional, and considerations of general bodily health, housing conditions, and income.
Yeah.
We must remember.
Okay. In other words, stress. Hey, like I said, if it's natural, you don't need anything, which is why NFP started out of the bag. It's just like anything. Look at the Anglicans in 1930. They said, whoa, only for very serious reasons can married couples only use contraception. And then it just exploded into everything. And now we started off, the Catholics, saying, only for very serious reasons can you use NFP, very extreme serious. And now it's like, oh yeah, NFP is freaking kicks booty. It's all about love and everything. So now it's like NFP to the max. And everyone's, Christopher West is in La La Land. That guy, he's like, the way he talks kind of reminds me of a new ager, all this like groovy language, dude. He's based on everything he says is based on the lie that of the inseparable purposes of the conjugal act. They are separable because primary is independent of the secondary. That's the lie that's going on everywhere. So when you create two dependent purposes, you have no primary purpose, which means marriage has no purpose, which is exactly what Michael Knoll says. You take kids out, it goes away. Hold on, here we go.
Remember that the limits truly very wide about which Pius XII spoke were based on his earlier assessment that it is, quote, medical, eugenic, economic, and social, unquote, causes which render NFP use legitimate. Another line of argument I want to pursue involves a discussion of the purpose of procreation in conjunction with God's original command to Adam and Eve, increase and multiply, from Genesis 1:28.
This should be good.
One
What
of
are you
the
going to
chief
say?
insights of the Aristotelian/Thomistic philosophic tradition is that every action has an end. Things exist for a purpose. God's command to Adam and Eve was to bring about the peopling of the earth. While certainly the birth of every human being is a good, the duty of married couples to have children is rationally related to the population needs of the world.
Up. There we go. There's the lie right there again. Yeah. The duty and the population needs. Depopulation people say we have too much population. NFP people say we don't have enough population. We need more. Okay. God's in charge of the population. To start tweaking the numbers is playing God. Whether you're saying we have to, we have to control population for this reason or that reason. No, God controls the population. And she said earlier, there's an incentive to have kids. You know what I mean?
And the church. As Pius XII taught, quote, the individual and society, the people and the state, the church itself depend for their existence in the order established by God, unfruitful marriages, unquote. A very interesting discussion of this question took place in the 1950s and early 1960s by moral theologians entirely orthodox and loyal to the church's magisterium. In particular, let us look at a work written by Jesuit fathers John C. Ford and Gerald Kelly.
Ford and Kelly were kind of wild dudes. They weren't the greatest. They said some stuff that was, I can't remember exactly, but no, I don't like them.
Volume 2, Marriage Questions of Their Contemporary Moral Theology, published in 1964. Just looking at his, it says, lest anyone think that Fathers Ford and Kelly were part of the phalanx of dissenting moralists, which at that period was just beginning to operate in the open, the authors explicitly state that the church can never approve of contraception. They say that.
Okay, by the way, if contraception, you're contra conception, you don't want to conceive, you're acting against conception. NFP is the same thing. You're acting against conception. You are keeping deliberately the seed from the egg. You're keeping it away. Rather than a physical barrier, you use a timing barrier.
The church is so completely committed to the doctrine that contraception is intrinsically and gravely immoral that no substantial change in this teaching is.
Yeah, contraception is immoral gravely because it stops the primary purpose. And NFP is gravely immoral because it stops the primary purpose.
Possible. It is irrevocable. On page 277 of their.
I'm going to breathe a little bit like, who's the guy who, I'm trying to think. Hang on, I got to think of his name. I was thinking of Michael Lofton. Sorry, I can't even listen to the guy. I don't mean to pick on him or whatever, because he breathes. He's like, and then I was doing this, and then I did that, and I'm like, it's just if he would stop breathing, I could listen to him. It's annoying. But I heard he got liberal because he had an annulment. I wish I knew more about Michael Lofton like that. If anyone knows, let's just see what else. Miss Laura Vandervoss keeps saying, here we go.
Book. In this period, between approximately 1963 and the appearance of Humane Vitae 1968, few would have been so bold as to make such a statement. Father Ford went on to publish an important article co-authored with Germaine Grisey in the June 1978 issue of Theological Studies.
I don't think he's good either.
Called Contraception and the Infallibility of the Ordinary Magisterium, arguing for the infallibility of the teaching contained in Humane Vitae, which came out. Okay. Fathers Ford and Kelly opine that even with absolutely no excusing cause based on health, economics, etc., no married couple is bound by the law of God to have more children than is necessary for the general conservation and gradual increase of the human race.
Nobody's bound to have more children than what you need to provide for the human race. This is more utilitarian, like I say, Nazi kind of stuff. We must have these number of kids and blah, blah. Oh, spare me. That's totally God's department. If God wants you to have 17 kids or 2 kids, he's going to do that. You don't get in the way of that. It's crazy.
They state, quote, there may be difficulty in determining the exact limit for various countries, but certainly today in the United States, a family of 4 children would be sufficient to satisfy the duty, unquote.
See how weird that is? We've decided that a family of 4 is good to satisfy the duty. And hey, check out all the NFP families around you at church. How many kids do they have? Or whatever. That's what's going on. Susie Key, why don't you chill out? Girlfriend, sit down. Okay, here we go.
Footnote. Oh, okay. Same source. They're just telling you the same source. Such an approach to the question of use of natural family planning was not limited to these 2 authors. As they state, quote, verbal acceptance of the theory was expressed by a great majority of some 30 moral theologians who discussed it at Notre Dame in June 1952 on the occasion of the annual meeting of the Catholic Theological Society of America, unquote. I am not insisting on 4 children as necessarily the correct number. In Europe, at least, with its falling population and huge influx of Muslims, a higher number would seem to be called for. I only wish to argue that the general approach of these authors and of the preconciliar moralists was correct. Agreement on the exact number of children which fulfills one's duty is less important than acceptance of the principle involved.
That's right. The principle involved is you have a duty to procreate, and it's a complete lie created by the Anglicans in 1930. Increase and multiply is nature, not duty. When you make it duty, you transfer nature into the hands of people, and you create your own nature. Hey, little Miss Super Scratch Fleas, can you go back to sleep? You're doing so good back there. Okay, hang on. Here we go.
In no way do I intend to disparage large families or those heroic spouses who do not wish to use periodic abstinence to space their children. My only purpose.
By the way, NFP is periodic incontinence.
In writing is to show that the church, always a loving mother, speaking through her sovereign pontiffs, has indicated a generous attitude toward NFP use, an attitude, as Pius XII stated it, of, quote, sympathy and comprehension, unquote, for the struggles of married couples. These couples should not have burdens put upon them greater than God requires.
These couples should not have burdens put upon them greater than God requires. Then don't put burdens on them, but God's in charge of the kids. Okay? And this is the stupidest thing here.
And to know what the requirements of God's law are, we simply turn to his church, the Catholic Church, the ark of salvation for all mankind.
Yes, procreation is primary, and this is good. Let's go back to Casti Connubii for a second. Hold on. Check this out. Casti Connubii. Oh, let me get up here. Just saying. Pardon me. Blah 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 blah. 8. Where are we? Okay. So speaking of the laws of God, which are immutable, to take away from man the natural and primeval right of marriage, to circumscribe, that means cut down, reduce, whatever, make smaller, eliminate, as in lower the ability to get pregnant, fertility. To circumscribe in any way the principal ends of marriage laid down by the beginning of God himself, the words increase and multiply, is beyond the power of any human law. Okay? So you can't circumscribe, increase, and multiply. Nobody can do that. No pope can do that. Okay? Now hold the phone here. Okay, so check this out. Now we're at Humanae Vitae, right? Limits to man's power. So they're saying here, they're talking about deciding who can procreate life, if you know, and then it says there are limits that no public authority can lawfully exceed. When you're talking about procreation, there are limits which no one, private or public, can lawfully exceed. Okay? So here's the main difference, and here's the reason we're here talking. This is the stupid that was injected into NFP, which is Humanae Vitae, which is the personalistic norm she keeps talking about, that she's effectively talking about. Okay. So back here, Casti Connubii, they said, increase and multiply. That is the thing which you can't touch. Okay. And then back at Humanae Vitae, it says the thing you can touch it if, for reasons of reverence due to the whole human organism, and increase and multiply. So the limits are due to so they've added another reason of limits. So if, like she said, if there's a lack of reverence due to the whole human, then you can reduce or circumscribe, increase, and multiply. That's the phrase right there. That's where they get into trouble. You've created this two-headed monster, or this monster with no heads. It's got purposes, and neither of them are primary. You have two imprimary purposes: reverence and natural functions, which is procreation. So this phrase right here doesn't belong there. This is the origin of all the trans stuff and all the what is a woman stuff and love wins. You got to have reverence, that's love, and you got to have natural functions. And Casti Connubii said all you have to have is natural functions. All righty, hang on. Let's go to this. See what she says.
Last footnote. I have said nothing in this article about the teaching of natural family planning and about certain abuses which it is sometimes said may arise in this connection. These may well be true, and where they exist obviously should be corrected, but they should be corrected in the light of the fundamental theological and moral principles which we have seen in the teaching of the Church, and with the aim of making knowledge of NFP available to all who can use it legitimately. That's the end of the article, end of footnotes,
You
about
can't use
Thomas
it,
Stork, who is the author. Mr. Thomas Stork is the author of The Catholic Milieu, 1987, Foundations of a Catholic Political Order, 1998, Christendom in the West, 2000, and numerous articles and reviews on Catholic culture and social teaching. He is a member of the editorial board of the Chesterton Review and holds an MA from St. John's College, Santa Fe, New Mexico. Many of his writings can be found online at www.thomasstork.org. Anyway, I hope that was helpful for you. It brought up a lot of good points, so I thought it was worth sharing the article in its entirety. And again, let's not get into magisterial texts.
I might have to
An official.
I might have to talk to my friend over at the Chesterton Society about Thomas Stork, if that's where if he's involved with them. That would be Dale Ahlquist, of course. Here we go.
Church teaching more than is actually there, and qualifying it, as we may think, prudent, because the church is the mother to the universal church. If she doesn't get more specific, it's because she has good reasons not to, and we don't need to judge that. We don't need to confine it within even more space, as I've seen done in traditionalist circles. And
the traditionalists, or whatever she wants to call them, are goofed up. And if you look, it's NFP wide open or zero. That's it. Not there's no spectrum of NFP because it's nature. That's why it says no reason, however grave.
We will be talking more about in future videos. So thank you for watching, and I hope this article is edifying to you.
All right.
Please like and subscribe.
Okay. All right. That's good. So Laura, I do hope you kind of respond or wake up or something. I'm going to put this, and I'm going to put it on your channel too, because this is, I think I've talked enough about it. You know what? It's time to get back to Monday morning here soon. So thanks for watching, and don't be shy. Like I said, on the comments, you can call me up on the phone. Anyone who wants to talk, I'm the easiest guy in the world to reach, and I talk to everybody, and I always answer all the comments. No problemo. That's probably the main difference. God bless.